Hi, everyone. This is Chaya Rivka, Zwolinski of BreslovWoman.org, and welcome to Breslov Lunchtime Learning. And today we are going to be discussing the topic of Das, holy awareness and understanding. And it's often said that women don't have Das, or dot in modern Hebrew. And what we really need to know is that doesn't mean that we don't have awareness or understanding. It just means that that's not our strong point, and we have other strong points, such as Bina. And the concept of the translation is very tricky. Colloquially, Das means smarts. You say someone has Das. They have an understanding of an issue. But from a not just a basic Hebrew etymological point of view, but also from the more Kabbalistic point of view or mystical point of view, Das is one of the Sefirot. And it's one that is associated with Chachma and Bina. You've often heard of Chachma, Bina, and Das, which of course everybody knows is the acronym Chabad, which comes from that. And Das is something that manifests when another Sephira, Keter or Keser, isn't there. And so there's a very complex relationship with this idea of being attached to a supernal understanding of things, and yet at the same time being able to apply it and bring it down into this world. Now, I'm going to be discussing Das through the teachings of Rebbe Nachman, and maybe we'll touch on some other teachers as well. And what we'll be doing is we'll be using Rebbe Nachman's advice book, because this will give us an overview and summary of several of his lessons regarding this topic. And for those of you who have it in the Hebrew, Likutei Eitzot, you can, of course, follow along in the Hebrew or the English as you want. We're not going to necessarily be touching on every single paragraph in the chapter, but we'll be discussing several of them. Okay, now, one moment, please. Okay, so Rebbe Nachman begins by saying, true Das, true understanding is in the heart. And he says, even the heathen nations possess understanding, but it's not in the heart. So what he's saying here is the idea of really grasping a concept, a spiritual concept, and really having a deep, abiding, experiential, connection with that concept. That requires the heart. And, it's very interesting because in Judaism, people often say, oh, you have a Yiddish cup in Yiddish. They say you have a Jewish head, meaning you're really smart. Okay, Jews are smart. Plenty of other people are smart too. But what makes our path different is that we don't just relegate understanding to the head the way the Greeks did, or the way today even the descendants of the Greeks, at least philosophically speaking, the democratic nations view understanding, and yet at the same time we don't just relegate understanding and knowledge to the heart the way the world's most major religion, well, it's not, maybe not the largest religion, but if it's not, it's one of the top 2 or 3, Christianity did. And we are a synthesis of both types of understanding. That is Jewish das. That's Jewish understanding. And the way we get that understanding, we have to understand that very often when Jewish texts refer to thoughts, they're actually referring to feelings, and they're referring to the thoughts of the heart, okay? Because there is an interaction that must occur between head and heart. Or as the Rebbe says, the heart must be filled with awe of God. We must have awe. He says it's just not enough to acknowledge Hashem, to acknowledge God in the mind alone. We must draw our intellectual understanding down into the heart. And to be so aware of Hashem that our heart is filled with awe and fear of the greatness of Hashem. And that awe and fear is usually translated as yiras Hashem, or fear of Hashem. It's palpably different than fear of spiders or fear of flying or whatever, or fear that someone's going to yell at you, okay? The fear and awe of Hashem is a special feeling that has elements of fear, has elements of awe, and is perhaps a synthesis of the two. It's a feeling in which we really bring this appreciation for the absolute mind-boggling greatness of Hashem and everything He's created and everything He sustains into our hearts. One of the ways to do that, and this is something I've mentioned before from Tanya, which is really interesting, is that in Tanya, it's not just in Tanya, but the Baal HaTanya says it very interestingly, that if Hashem were to turn His attention away from the world for 1 minute, it wouldn't exist. Nothing would exist. It would revert to absolute nothingness. This is awe, okay? This is an awesome fear as well. Hashem didn't just create and sit back, and watch us from a distance. He is actively focusing His intention on the world, and this is what sustains creation. In other words, we can think about it as if Hashem in every moment, what moment means is different for Hashem than what it means for us, is constantly creating creation. Constantly. It wasn't a one-time deal. Okay? And what we do is we wake up in the morning, we count on the sun coming out. At night, we count on the moon coming out. We count on when there's a breeze, the trees will rustle. We count on when there are rain clouds, it will rain. And we see that the laws of nature, which Hashem supersedes and determines what the laws of nature will be, is something that we have come to be soft about, things we expect. But really, we should at times remind ourselves to have an awe of this greatness of Hashem and to appreciate that, hey, our existence and the existence of everything else is dependent on Him. And then, says the Rebbe, when we have that, that's just, by the way, that's just like a very short expression of Hashem's greatness. We could go on, but you can certainly think to yourself about this and meditate on it. But then when we have this awe, this yiras Hashem, this awe and fear of the greatness of Hashem, we become aroused. We become spiritually aroused to connect to Him, to be close to Him, to yearn for Him, to serve Him with true devotion, because we really have just a glimpse into His utter greatness. And, this is something that as Jews we have to appreciate. It's very, very rare. The nation's conception of God is either, lahavdil, God lahavdil, that he's a human form, of course, which is limiting. Or the other conception is that there are many gods, chas v'shalom, or to all kinds of intermediaries, including stars and angels and as if those intermediaries have power. Okay, they don't have power. Only Hashem has power. Or their conception is, as in the Greeks and the Western view, God created everything. And, I'm not talking about Christianity, but just the general secular Western view. God created everything, and then he sat back and he's kind of just watching what's going on. Now, there's a famous story from the Talmud. I just have to mention it because it's just a very cute story, but a very informative story. There was a Roman queen and a Roman governess, and she asked one of the great rabbis, she was interested in Judaism, and she asked one of the great rabbis, why, what is your God so busy with? He created the world. What is he so busy with? And the rabbi said, he's very busy with shidduchim, matchmaking. He's busy making matches between men and women. And she said, I can do that. And she went back to her palace, and she summoned all her servants, and she said, hey, you, to this one, you're going to marry her. And she said to that one, hey, you're going to marry him. She matched up her hundreds of servants and said, you're all married, and sent them on their merry way. The next morning, she called all her servants into the room. This one had torn clothes, that one had a black eye, this one was crying, that one was yelling, this one was just totally distraught. And she saw that she was so busy matching people, and it was disastrous. And she appreciated that Hashem knows the ins and outs of each person, and he knows what is best for them. And when we truly believe this, we've attained a measure of das. So what do I mean? We know people get married and they fight and they get divorced, God forbid. And people fall into situations where they have bad employers or terrible personal situations. And there's all kinds of difficulties. And hey, let's be real. There are marriages like the marriages that the Roman governess arranged. People have marriages like that. So how can we say that Hashem is doing something any different? Okay? Not trying to talk about fear here, but what I want you to understand is that the matches that this governess was allowed to make were disastrous, not because they just didn't work out, but because they were pointless. Okay? If you throw two people together in a pointless fashion, it's pointless. But if you take into account every nuance of their neshama, of their soul, the way Hashem does, then even if there are difficulties, okay, even if there are arguments and God forbid divorce, okay, still that was a tikkun for that neshama. There was a higher purpose for it. It was a rectification for that person's soul. So people cry. People suffer, and they say, why was I born into the family I was born into? My family was very difficult, maybe, God forbid, even abusive. Or, I married this person and it ended terribly. It was so awful. How could that person be my soulmate? Or my situation, I have one problem after another. How are we saying there's a higher purpose here? So the way to really have God in this instance, holy awareness and understanding, begins through, says the Rebbe, meditation, hitbodedut, talking to Hashem in your own words about whatever's on your heart and your mind, serious stuff. I mean, you can absolutely talk about the day-to-day, and we must ask Hashem for, help with our paying our bills and so on and so forth, but really asking them about these deep topics as well. And then, says the Rebbe, a person has to examine oneself. We have to do a cheshbon hanefesh. We must do an accounting of our soul and look at ourselves, not anyone else, not the difficult family situation or the painful difficulties with what was supposed to be our soulmate or whatever that is. No. Rebbe says, look inward and weigh up all your actions. And this is the path to the light. Okay. This is the path to the light. Because, why? When we begin to see ourselves and to really stop focusing outward and start looking inward. And for some people, this might take just the form of talking to Hashem and Hitbodedut. For others, it might take thinking and meditation as well. Some people journal about this or write about this. Whatever it is, okay, how you examine yourself, we begin to see, okay, remember, we still have to have holy self-esteem for those of you who've been in my classes before, but we begin to see how, I have this weakness or I have this lack, and maybe that person was testing me in that area, and so on and so forth. We can begin to see where our own flaws, maybe we're hypersensitive and we work with someone who's totally insensitive, okay, not just a little bit. Okay, we begin to see, it's my hypersensitivity, and this is teaching me something. Whatever it may be, I don't know what it is for you. That honestly, that just popped into my head. But whatever the issue may be, okay, doesn't matter. Whatever the issue is for you, okay, that's going to give you a deeper understanding of, these things are here to test me, to correct me, to help me grow. Now, there's an even deeper look too. We can also, if this is only after the fact that we've done our cheshbon hanefesh, we truly have evaluated ourselves, we're honest, we're able to see our flaws without falling apart, okay, we all got them, right? We know we have a holy soul as well that's connected to God, and we have the potential to be a tzaddik, but we also have flaws, we've made errors, and we've committed sins, and so on. And once we've really been genuinely honest, and for many people I find today that's very difficult, and I'll talk about that in a minute, then we can say, okay, I find absolutely, I can't understand it. There doesn't seem to be an obvious reason to me. I've looked, I've searched the depths of my soul, I've prayed, I've asked other people for their feedback, because that can be very helpful as well, especially if you have a mentor or a counselor or whatever. And then what happens is we can say, maybe this is from a gilgul, from a past life. Maybe it's a correction from a past life. Certainly an innocent child born into a very, let's say, God forbid, very difficult situation. Maybe they're orphans, maybe they're disabled. Certainly that's often from a past life, okay? Sometimes it's something that the neshama, the soul, needs in this life. Sometimes it's from a past life. Sometimes it's a combination of things. Truly, most of the time we should be focused on this life, because I think that we could have a tendency to say, I'm perfect, so it must be a past life. No. We still have to do the hard work, says the Rebbe. Then this is the path to the light. This is the path to the true understanding and the connection with Hashem. Now, how does this relate? How does this first part of this chapter relate to women, this expression, women don't have das? So women can have a wonderful quality of being able to, like Rivka in the Torah, like Rebecca in the Bible, to look and see and say, this one, something's not right with that person. Or this one, that person we can trust. Very often it's the opposite. We can't trust that person. Something we feel, okay? And that's true. That's kind of Bina. But women tend to, not all, women tend to err on the side of being more critical of other people, maybe even more resentful. This is what our sages say. I'm not pulling this out of any, psychology or anything like that. And the idea is that in this day and age where, according to popular opinion, everybody has a personality disorder cluster B, everybody's narcissistic, everybody's borderline, whatever it is, okay? Those things really are related to this idea of an inability to see oneself. And when the evaluation piece is missing, the cheshbon hanefesh is missing, everything gets projected outwards. This is what projection is. So this person becomes our arch enemy and everything's their fault. Or that group of people, everything becomes our arch enemy and that's their fault. And by the way, I'm specifically talking within the Jewish world right now because we do know that Jews as a nation, we certainly have the Jewish people have enemies. It's no joke. Okay, but I'm talking about within, our communities and connections. And so my community is okay and that one isn't, or my community isn't okay. Whatever it is, this detracts from any measure of das we can have. Okay, we can't see the light if we're always projecting outward. At the same time, it is so very important for us to not beat ourselves up and feel total self-mortification to the point of we hate ourselves. That's also totally forbidden. As a matter of fact, most of our lives should be spent looking towards the good point in others, for sure, not a question. Even the ones who we don't like or who bother us, we should look for their good points, and in ourselves. We must do both. And we should rest on this foundation. For those of you who are interested, I did a very brief overview of Azama. It's a few, I think, phone classes that you can find on the BreslovWoman.org website, and there's some videos on Azamra, an overview, and I taught it also in great textual detail. I think those videos are on Vimeo, I'm not sure, but everything else is on YouTube or my website. And the idea is like this, is that we have to find that balance. We have to support each other by only focusing on the other person's good points. Nobody's in a position today, for the most part, to give mussar, okay, to give ethical and moral correction unless it's asked for, or unless you really are a mentor to somebody, and even then it has to be done sensitively, okay? However, at the same time, each of us is obligated to make a cheshbon nefesh, an accounting of the self, a self-evaluation. So what are the guidelines? Rebbe Nachman's guidelines are absolutely clear. He says, 23 hours a day, a person must be happy and look to the good points only. However, during hitbodedut, during that personal prayer time with Hashem, we are certainly encouraged to confess and evaluate and confess. We can use that time, but it cannot be more than 1 hour a day of that kind of self-examination and confession. 1 hour a day is absolutely maximum. And he says, Rebbe Nachman says, by rights, we should all be engaged in this. We should be engaged in this all day long, looking at ourselves and correcting ourselves. But that would make us depressed, and depression is a very serious sin. Depression is a sin. Sadness is a sin. I'm not talking about I'm sad because I have grief and I lost someone. I'm talking about sustained bitter sadness is a sin. So the idea is maximum 1 hour a day, and I'm going to give you my opinion about today's generation and whoever's on this call. It depends on who you are, how you were raised, but I would say for most people, 20 minutes of that kind of cheshbon hanefesh per day is the maximum. That's my personal advice to you. I think people are too sensitive to do more. Now, the first time, if you've never done a cheshbon hanefesh and you're reviewing your life and you're reviewing the missteps you've made and the out-and-out averas and whatever, okay? We all have to do it at some point. Better now than when it's too late, right? So when we do this, sometimes the first few times you do this, it might be overwhelming, scary. It might take more than 20 minutes. Get some support, or just restrain yourself and just start slow with 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, because the most important thing is to be b'simcha, to be in happiness, to be joyful. That even takes precedence over self-correction, if self-correction is going to cause atzvus, which is a bitter, heavy depression. And that's the truth. Yes, we do have to confess, we do have to examine, but if you try it and it makes you depressed to the point where you're depressed, you don't just feel sad and a broken heart that you're separated from Hashem. Yeah, sometimes the first time we look in a mirror for real, it can be a big shock. And it's like, oh my, all the stuff I've been projecting outwards. Oh, now I see. And it can be a big shock. And the ideal is to feel the pain of being separated from Hashem. How could I be so foolish as to separate myself from my beloved Father in heaven? How could I? So, Abba, I can't believe I separated myself from you by doing all this stuff and by all this negativity. That's the feeling. If the feeling is, I'm no good, I'm a worm, I don't deserve to live, I'm horrible, I hate myself, then we have a problem. Don't go there, okay? Now, I do want to continue with another one today, if possible. I don't know. It's kind of the other one's kind of long. Maybe we won't. So if anyone has any questions, okay, you can unmute yourself by pressing *6. And I know that it takes a minute. Sometimes you have to press a few times. Some people have it's difficult. So please press *6 if you want to unmute yourself and if you have a question, and I'll give you a minute to respond. And in the meantime, remember, simcha is everything. Be happy. Don't beat yourself up. Focus on the positive, except for a few minutes a day where we have to take a look in the mirror. Any questions? Okay, that's unusual. It doesn't seem like there are any. All right, so I'm going to wish you all a very good week. I would like to remind you that we have a new class Wednesday mornings. It's only half an hour at 11 a.m. Eastern Time on Zoom. And you can find out information in the WhatsApp group or on breslovwoman.org. I'd like to remind you about the Parsha class, the Torah portion class on Tuesdays at 12:30 Eastern Time. And you can find out information about that on WhatsApp or in the on my website. And also the mini lessons, if anyone would like to sponsor them or be a part of them, please text or WhatsApp me and I'll add you to the group if you're not already a part of the group. And I would like to wish you all a wonderful week. And it's Wednesday, so I can say good Shabbos and Shabbat Shalom. Okay, everyone.